Hey guys, all right, I know that this video is so long in the making. It is something that, guys, I did not intend to put off this long, and I really appreciate everybody who has so patiently and impatiently waited for this to happen. This is my DNA update video. Now, guys, I'm going to give you a heads up ahead of time. This is as best as I can give for that update. Not everybody's going to love the information that I have, and I have a lot of things to address with this video. So, with that said, let's get right to it. You guys can let me know in the comment section down below whether you were happy or not, because I know you're going to anyhow. On that note, guys, really fast, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to address the comments. I have read as many of the comments as I could. The ones that I do get notifications for, I definitely saw. The ones that I didn't get notifications for, there are some that I found later on when I was trying to go through unread messages. But I do know that there are probably some that I still missed because, guys, YouTube was filtering those messages for me. It's the way I have my settings set. There are a lot of people whose comments did not get published, not because they did anything wrong, but because I actually have my settings so that links cannot be included in the comments. There were several I did go through and I approved afterwards because it was people sharing other sites to use for family searches and stuff. So if your comment did not get published, guys, that could be why. Maybe I missed it or it was something else. I have it set that way to keep trolls and bots and whatnot from sharing spam. So with that said, guys, I am trying to pull stuff up here. Now, if I can get my screen grabs to work, I'm going to have the screen kind of split here, and I will be sharing with you guys the actual, like, as I see it on my Ancestry account. First thing I want to tell you guys is my DNA. All right, guys. So it has been a year since I did that first video. And guys, again, I love the comments. There are a lot of wonderful people who have commented, a lot of people who are trying to be very helpful, a lot of judgmental people, and some straight up, like, I don't know what you were trying to say, people. So I am going to try to address everything that was mentioned the most and touch on other things as we go. With my DNA percentages, obviously, if you have ever worked with DNA or if you've read or watched other videos, guys, as more information is uploaded into their website, they do change. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to admit up front, when I first did the DNA test and I did my first video, I did not know absolutely everything that went along with it, including how much for fun this really is. I wasn't putting crazy stock in it, but at the same time, more than I really knew to. And I found this out because both of my parents have actually also taken a DNA test, which I will touch on later in this video about how helpful that has actually been in different areas. But with that said, when I was working on my dad's tree, I know, basically, I've worked on a very large family tree. I've got, like, I don't know, 1,500, 1,000 people, 2,000 people, somewhere in there. I'm going to have to go back and double check. But when I was compiling his tree, I knew what countries everybody had come through and everything else. Well, his DNA came back, and because he agreed to take this test, partially to satisfy my own curiosity, but also because everybody was curious how it would play out, which, again, I'll touch on in a second. There were some interesting things that came up, such as it showed absolutely no German for him, but we knew that there were ancestors that came from Germany. So we were very confused at the time. You know, my mind started running and I was thinking, oh, there was some more backstory there, considering what we had found on my mother's side, that my great-grandfather was not my great-grandfather. So we weren't sure with my dad's side what we were finding. Since then, guys, really fast, there are settings within there that you can put. I actually have not played with it because the information's still interesting, but there is like roughly a 50% accuracy as far as exact regions. It's based on how many other people have taken DNA tests, where all of those families seem to be linked to, and all of that, paired with some other scientific stuff. And I know a ton of people have commented about the mitochondrial DNA versus other stuff, and that everything pulls from the mother, which is also why people can get different results being from the same family. So if there is a way to reduce that percentage, or actually raise it, I guess, for the accuracy, and instead of being narrowed down to such tight regions, it enlarges to the point where basically it tells you what continent, because that's really about as accurate as it can get, because, guys, migration has happened since the beginning of time. The concept of country boundaries and stuff is really a newer concept. And okay, I don't know, somebody's going to correct me on that too. Yes, there have always been differences in people groups and whatnot. But anyhow, my point is the continents are really where the bulk of everything came from. So keeping all of that in mind, I am still going to run through exactly what countries Ancestry tells me, and what it's been updated to, which also has really shifted a lot. So I have a 40% Irish, as Ancestry DNA puts it right now. Another year from now, I'm going to be curious to see how much these percentages change. And now they have gotten to where they do break down the Irish heritage by counties or groups, places within Ireland. And that has broken down even farther over the last year. It's really been interesting to watch that shift and change. But we're just going to worry about the 40%. If I manage to get that up here, you are seeing, Munster and wherever else down through there. What is really interesting to me, guys, we know for a fact the majority of my Irish background came from County Cork. But that is like one thing that's not specifically listed, though I think it still technically falls in this region. I need to go back and do some geography work on Ireland. Moving on, though, we have England and Northwestern Europe at 31%. The wording of these has really changed over the last year, too, because the next one is Germanic Europe. It used to be Germany, I believe. So we've got 31% England, Northwestern Europe, 14% Germanic Europe, 11% Scotland, 2% Norway. I am now at, and this one, I'm going to tell you guys about this too, 1% Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples, and 1% Finland. I have had some questions and comments about the Cameroon, Congo, and all of that. Guys, I know my wording may not have been the best in the first video, but wow, some people really take it upon themselves to interpret the way things were said. First of all, I'm going to say that was the very lowest percentage on my list previously. The reason I didn't say a number is because there wasn't a number. It actually said less than 1%. That's all I had. Now, at one point, that actually got up to 2%, but now that I'm looking at it, it has come back down to 1%. So there was a reason I did not put a percentage in. And it's not because guys, it is not because I am disappointed or upset or not happy with knowing this information. In fact, if you know me in person, you know that I actually got kind of excited about this fact. What I was not happy about was finding how much different our family history is than what I had always been taught. Now, it's not because I'm disappointed in any of this or anything else. There is a level of thinking you know something and learning something different. Anybody who's ever had a mind shift in anything in life is going to understand this concept, that it's not because I'm upset to have African history or DNA. Guys, that's actually kind of cool. And somebody is going to judge me for that statement now too, but whatever. You guys will do with it what you want. Either way, though, Finland has not changed. That has stayed a solid 1%. I'm going to actually have to go back and watch my other video. I don't remember if Scotland was originally in there or not. I know I only had like 4 things. So that is my DNA breakdown. So Ancestry has actually started from the DNA, breaking it down even farther into additional communities. This is not necessarily where your DNA comes from, but where your linked ancestry has traveled through. So I have got the early New England settlers. I've got Kansas and southern Nebraska settlers. I've got early Connecticut and New York settlers. There are stories that are found, or possible stories, which I have not gone through just yet. In fact, I was kind of glancing at some of that before I came on here to do this. So that is the DNA portion of this. Touching on where all of this goes. Again, guys, I have been genuinely amazed over the last year watching how much this has shifted and changed and ebbed and flowed, because it matters on who else has taken these DNA tests. And I said before that both of my parents have. Now, my mother actually took one before I did. And that is what spurred me to choose to do it, because I found out, not directly from her, that they had already found out my great-grandfather was not my great-grandfather, which means there's a good chunk of our ancestry, of our history, that I thought I knew that was no longer that. So now all of a sudden there's a whole new family line to learn. And that was almost overwhelming, because this is stuff that I have spent 40 years learning. And that's a lot of knowledge that just feels like it went to waste. So now I know about this whole other family that is not actually related to us. But that's okay too. I started to do some research on my grandfather's family, and I actually kind of pumped the brakes on that. Over the last year, guys, I'm going to put this out there too, because this really matters. COVID happened. That has affected how a lot of things have functioned. So when I did this a year ago and I started learning history and stuff about how far back certain lines went, it sparked a new interest. And I had zero clue that we went, like, I had ancestors from the Mayflower. Just because it's such a popular, not popular, but such a famous event, it became one of those things that was a fascination. Now, somebody's going to comment on this, and I know, but the African DNA, the Cameroon, Congo, and Western Bantu peoples, I don't have anything yet to anchor that to. Now, I have had a lot of comments, so before anybody says anything, let me tell you that my statement before about the slave history in the United States and all of that, guys, what we do know is that there are a lot of DNA matches in the South. And there are a lot of DNA matches with people who carry a much higher percentage than we do. So that is where some of that comes from, knowing that it probably came up through the South. And all of that comes through that family line that I have not fully investigated yet. I have a great aunt and a great uncle who are still alive that I briefly got into contact with almost a year ago. And I chickened out. I have not reached out to them any farther to see what kind of information they have or not. I have a cousin that actually lives in the same area as us that I talked to briefly. He also is the one that found out that he is part of this family, but didn't know a lot of the information before. So he had reached out to our great aunt. Well, it's actually his aunt, my great aunt, to get this family information. And he said he did get a lot from her. There have been a lot of shifts and changes in my family as a whole over the last year. So a lot of things just got put on hold because it wasn't a priority. So guys, I don't have a lot of information on that. What I can tell you is I know where a lot of the DNA travels through and where that comes from. So for anybody who's carrying on about, you don't know what's from slavery and you don't know, first mother and all this stuff, guys, there is more to it. We know the direction that all of the DNA seems to be shifting through, and it comes up through the South. So if you're going to tell me that I have African DNA that shifts through the South but is not related to slavery, you go ahead and tell me that. My bigger thing though, guys, it was a pride check. And it's actually kind of sad that a lot of people miss that. It was a pride check on my behalf because I had an arrogant view of a family line that I thought was very fresh, generation-wise, in the United States. Somehow, there were only certain lines that had ever been discussed. It never occurred to a lot of us that there were a few other branches that nobody just ever talked about. I have shared a lot of information with my aunts and uncles and farther extended family because it had not been looked into previously. So that said, I did mention though, my mom did the DNA test before me. My dad did it after me. And the reason was because Ancestry actually has it set up that if it is a familial connection close enough, it will label it from your mother's side or your father's side, which is also really cool because it saves a little bit of the legwork of trying to figure out how am I related to this person. And that is also part of what is helping us with sorting out that extra family line that we don't really know much about, because I am able to look at those farther distant connections, though it doesn't really track mother versus father after the fourth cousin level. I'm assuming that there's a big scientific reason for that and the way the DNA breaks down, but that's just where that sits. So when it comes to that though, it really has been helpful. With that said, I don't have DNA connections on my father's side closer than fourth cousin. Which is really kind of crazy to me, because other than my dad who took the test, apparently in his family, it's either just a thing to not do the test or, to not have it so that it's publicly shareable or seeable about these connections. My mother's side, on the other hand, I have got people in every single level, from her through my grandmother, through my uncle, through cousins, through other people farther out. And it really makes a difference. There are 3 times as many people listed under my mother's category versus my father's in general. With that said, guys, I don't know if I shared this last time, but as of right now, my total matches on Ancestry DNA for family is 28,196 DNA matches. Of those, 1,556 are fourth cousin or closer. So I've got a lot of family. I really do. Not that I was ever shocked by that because I come from large families, on both sides of the family, actually. The next thing I really need to touch on really quick is there were a few people who seemed to be a little confused about myself versus my husband. So I'm just going to make that really quick here, make it clear that, first of all, his video is going to be completely separate from this one just to keep this stuff straight. At no point did I think or consider that there was Native American DNA from my family or for myself. That is something that it was never hinted at. It was never a thing. And I am very well aware that Native American DNA does not typically show up as its own in a lot of these DNA databases. My siblings, 3 of my siblings are Native American. So theirs absolutely would be. Theirs is a whole other scenario too, which I mentioned. So the Mayflower connection. I've had a lot of people ask about names and who else and whatnot. There are 2 primary ones. I do believe I came across a 3rd one, but when I was going back through, I couldn't figure out who it was. I want to say it was a Richard somebody, but it might have just been a different family connection. The ones I know for fact, guys, direct ancestry, for those who care about DNA or about Mayflower connections, it is John Howland and Elizabeth Tilley. Those are my 10th great grandparents, as in direct line all the way down. So I will run through that really fast. In fact, I'm going to try to put words up if I can, just for anybody who feels the need to take notes, I guess. So John Howland and Elizabeth Tilley. Their son, John Howland, married Mary Lee. Their daughter was Hannah Howland, who married Jonathan Crocker. Their son was James Crocker, who married Alice Swift. Their daughter was Abigail Crocker, who married John Williams. Their daughter was Anne Williams, who married Amos Patterson. Their daughter was Lucy Patterson, who married Jonathan Day. Their son, Amos Day, married Betsy Stanley. And their son was Arthur Day, who married Marianne Schwab. Their son, Louis Leroy Day, who married Mary Alvina Bremer. Their daughter was Lois Day, who married Peter Eugene Harrington. Those are my grandparents. Those are my dad's parents. So I totally just gave you guys the absolute full rundown of one of the lines from my dad's side of the family. He is the one who, when I told him that there was a Mayflower connection, I actually had the reaction that a couple people in the comments did, is that that is not something to be proud of. And he was very unhappy actually to learn about that too. I actually take the perspective that several people in the comments also do, is that it is our history. It is our past. We can be a little like, I didn't expect that and I don't love that, but it's not my personal history. It's our ancestors' history. We can't change it. We can't change who they were. All we can do is focus on who we are. So it's knowledge about where we come from. That's the part that matters. That is our Mayflower connection. Now, moving on, the burning topic that everybody is most curious about. Little girl Harrington. All right. My great aunt is the one that went missing when she was 2 years old. It was a huge tragedy. The thing that I think a lot of people have gotten confused on based on my other video, and I didn't think of it at the time, guys. For our family, coming to find the knowledge and information that she was found, that was actually the answer to that mystery for most of us. One of my great aunts, especially, who is also named Mary, was very appreciative of having this information. And as somebody who loves history herself and works in a museum, she has wanted to gather these newspaper clippings and everything else. I've had a lot of very helpful people talk about, going to the local library to get newspaper clippings that way. What I have to touch on, guys, is something that I've addressed in other videos, and I'm going to do a whole other one here pretty soon. We are in Western South Dakota. While we do advance with the rest of the nation for the most part, things are very different here still, in the same way that, 120 years ago, they were very different. 120 years ago, when my great aunt went missing, almost 120 years ago, they did not have what major cities may have had. There was no investigators. There was nothing else. Honestly, from what I could find, is that the journalists did half of it themselves as well. But I am going to touch on the fact that when you are a prominent figure in the community, your word was taken for a lot of things. And back then, guys, history tells us that people didn't ask too many questions if it would kick over the wrong stone. So my great-grandfather was prominent already at that time. And he was in town conducting business. In town, which now is a half-hour car ride away, back then by horse was much longer. I mean, it was a day's ride. This is also why he took a train to drive what is now 45 minutes to an hour away to go take care of his uncle's family when his uncle was killed in a mining accident. And it was a very different world. People took a man's word. Didn't mean that they always should have. Now, that said, there were a couple people who questioned, like, could my great-grandfather have even been involved? And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say no. Now, I cannot say that 100% definitively, but he was in town, which is a day's ride away. He was not there. I also do not believe, and guys, this is just deductive reasoning, that had my grandfather been the one to kill her, he would not have been the one to unearth her and then share it with the public news sources. What I can say is that given the information that we have, there were two possible suspects: my great-grandmother or the 14-year-old boy that was living with them. From what all of the articles state, and from talking to other people, it does not seem that the 14-year-old was very likely, but you can't fully rule him out. There are a lot of holes and loops in the story that make a person go, that's not quite right. And for now, for all of us right now, it is very easy to be like, well, who would do that? It was a different world. I do struggle to believe that my great-grandmother would have left 3 children that young for that long. But again, I don't fully know the world at that point in time, as most of you don't either. I know a lot of people have really been trying to help me figure out her name. Guys, I have searched. I have been through the county death records. I know somebody has suggested, sometimes that they would put it under like the father's name. Guys, I have combed through those records. The only thing I have not done is personally contacted the Catholic Church out of Sturgis to see if there's any way of finding records that way. Because, guys, COVID. I did the video right before everything hit, and then everything shut down. There was no way. Those offices were closed at that time. So I could not get a hold of anybody or any of that. And I kind of came to a point after talking to other family members that yes, it would be nice to know her name, but none of us have been able to find it. And we have been talking to other people, older generations, because there are other families that did talk to each other about some of this stuff. Nobody we have talked to actually knew the final outcome of this story. Now, there's a couple other families from the community that none of us did get in touch with because the older generations are all gone. And we don't know why they would have discussed it with the younger generations. So there's always going to be a level of mystery surrounding her death. That is just something that we have to accept. I'm not going to say I will never find her name, but the chances of that are incredibly slim, guys. If we can't even figure out where she was buried, it really reduces that. That is probably the one way we might end up finding that information, but we have combed through the grave records for the small country cemeteries that were in that area that we have guessed they could have used, and we have not found anything. So I don't know at this point. Hopefully, as the world is righted, and if you guys have been watching the news, South Dakota is not locked down like everybody else. So I am at a point where I could start digging into this more, but I have to be really careful not to just satisfy my own curiosity, but also to respect wishes of other family members. Like I said, everybody was really shocked to find out that this was not just a continuing missing child from over 100 years ago, but that portion of the mystery was solved. And that alone was a big mental check for a lot of people. Because if I remember correctly, my great aunt, who was most invested in receiving this information, she was a child when my great grandfather passed away. So she knew him. My dad did not know him. And I need to go back and check that. I don't remember if my dad had been born yet or not. But talking to him, he did not know him. So there's all of that. My grandfather and his siblings never talked about any of this. We've been in touch with people that way. I know my great aunt made some calls to people, and it seems as though me uncovering these articles was the closest anybody had ever come to information about it. So getting her name is really, it seems farther and farther away, because every stone we've turned has just come up empty. It's just one of those things, guys. And if somebody else wants to do some digging, see if you can find something great. The closest I've ever found is people hypothesizing that her name may have been Mary as well. But that was my grandmother's name. And as far as I can tell, guys, that's purely based on the fact that was a common practice for some families, was to name kids after the parents. And my great grandfather was a James, however you want to word it. And I he did pass. One of my great uncles was named James as well. So it's not unreasonable, but there's no guarantee of that either. Okay, guys, so that is the biggest chunk of my DNA updates. I have had several people comment and say, maybe we're related. And there's been a couple people, I've managed to do some searches and it turned out we weren't, but I am hoping that we have lifelong friends now. And there are other people that are still a very real possibility because, guys, as I said, that many DNA connections, there's a really good chance that I am like loosely related to a lot of people. And even those that are fourth cousin and closer, I mean, there's only 1,500 there, but guys, that's still a lot of people. And I know I do not know all of them. So there is that, because in fact, our families are so much wider than that. Guys, I said that my dad's side of the family, I don't have any DNA connections in the Ancestry database closer than a fourth cousin. So that just tells you how far spread out everything is and how some of this craziness works. All right, if you guys have any other questions, please leave that in the comment section down below. If you're going to leave a nasty comment, guys, it depends on my mood. YouTube will either sort it out for me, I could delete it, or as some of you have found out, I will leave you a snarky response. Because it depends on my mood and how I'm feeling with that. If you have anything constructive to say, feel free to leave that there. As far as all of the additional websites and doing DNA tests on other websites and whatnot, while it's well appreciated, I have all of that information from the other video, and I look into all of that as I have time. Because we have foster kiddos here now and everything else, I do not have the same amount of time. This stuff has gone to the wayside a little bit. In fact, that having 3 extra kiddos here is part of what's taken me so long to get this video done, because 10 kids in our house, it, you know, demands a little bit of time. And I make the kids a priority. So this stuff happens when I have a few extra minutes, and this is exactly what I had to get this video done. Anyhow, like I said, leave a comment in the comment section down below. In the meantime, I hope that you guys are having a blessed day. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything else coming up next. And I'll see you in the next one.